Phil, let's talk a little about like clients' needs and in a sense. From your experience, how often do clients inquire when they come to you about estate planning? It's like, I need an estate plan. Are
Mhm.
they also talking about real estate, or is like real estate is inherent in, well, I guess it is inherent in estate planning, right? It's gotta be.
Yeah.
I know where you always are, hanging 'neath the brightest star.
Welcome to B2B Synergy, the Power Partners USA podcast, your exclusive guide to discovering the potential of B2B partnerships. I'm Alan Armijo, owner of Power Partners USA, business-to-business introduction and referral service. Our members are B2B professionals who team up to provide each other repeat referral business or collaboration. Today's episode dives into real estate and estate planning, specifically the collaborative world between a realtor and an estate attorney. I'm happy to shine a light on Valerie Condon of Keller Williams Coastal Properties and Phil Shekerlian, owner of Bauer Shekerlian Law. Valerie and Phil, I'm really glad to have both of you together here on this podcast. I am a client of Phil's and have received some great advice from Valerie. One of the things I always feel is missing is having the professionals involved in my serious transactions be on the same page with me. For instance, I would talk to a realtor individually, and then I would go and talk to my trust attorney individually. What we're trying to do is understand that conversation, how it might go together and how you two work together. So in that vein, to both of you, how do estate planning and real estate intersect? And why would a realtor and an estate planning attorney collaborate on behalf of their clients?
You want to go first, Valerie?
I'll go first. It's a natural collaboration. Obviously, the role of the estate attorney is to put the wishes, requests of the individual into the trust. It's the role of the real estate agent to implement those wishes regarding the real property. Collaboration always works. Two heads are always better than one. And the outcome is a better transaction, a better result for the client. And that's always our objective.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would add, in addition to estate planning, the tax planning is extremely important as well. You need a good tax attorney that knows what the consequences of doing real estate transactions are, whether you're selling, gifting, doing a joint tenancy interest. Those are all have both asset protection and tax consequences, actually. So, the role of the estate and tax attorney is to advise on that. And then additionally for the realtor, especially when, at a time where most of our sales now come as a result of death. Here in Southern California, people are holding on to real estate for quite a long time, trying to go multi-generational. But because of Prop 19, a lot of people are ending up selling at death. And so it's important to have an experienced realtor like Valerie, who understands how to negotiate a sale of a property of someone who died. It's completely different than the sale of somebody who's alive, whether you're in probate or doing it through a trust, to navigate that process.
So in that regard, like, how do you communicate with each other and collaborate? Is it, as an attorney, is there certain information that's confidential that you can't pass on, or because it's the same client, how does that interaction go? And is the client actually involved? Or are you just talking to each other separately?
I'll start this.
Okay, go ahead.
It's really different for each individual client. Each circumstance is unique. Sometimes the clients want to be involved. Sometimes the clients just want the professionals to handle it so they can get on with their life. So it really just depends on how each client wants to work. And as long as the client says you can freely disclose facts to Valerie or whoever, then there's no issue with confidentiality there.
And the same on my side. If there's an issue that I think the attorney needs to know, I always clarify with the client, can I share this? This is pertinent. In terms of our collaborating, that happens at the beginning of the actual implementing the trust process and moving the assets to the heirs. For the most part, that would be when we would start communicating using various channels, whether that be email or text or conversations, to implement the real estate aspects of the trust in a way that are the highest benefit to the heirs.
Okay. So just switching gears a little bit, at Power Partners USA, we're about making introductions that lead to repeat referral business or collaboration for you. Besides each other, what other B2B professionals bring you repeat business or collaboration? And you can speak in the sense of like the real estate process. Who else might need to be involved in what you're doing? Sounds like you were already talking about a lawyer, another real estate lawyer, right?
So in a trust transaction, we have a trust needing to be implemented. One of the first professionals we would deal with in terms of real estate is a title officer to review the trust relevant to the real estate and make sure that it looks legal, every signature is legible, everything seems above board. It's the title company who's going to ensure the title of that property passes cleanly to the new purchaser or heir. So that would be the first person. In addition, we would need to perhaps have some contractors take a look at the property. Maybe it needs some repairs. Maybe it needs some upgrading. Maybe it just needs some preparation for sale. Or many times we bring in an appraiser if there are valuation issues or questions or disagreements. So those would be the three predominant other vendors that we would use: appraiser, contractor, and title company.
Absolutely. And then on the finance side of things, I typically like to bring in a CPA to make sure that it's not going to have any negative effects on the taxes. However, this will be the first time I'm publicly announcing this, but I actually acquired a CPA firm as of January 1st. So we do almost 1,000 tax returns a year between individual, business, trust, and estates. So I would bring in my other firm, my CPA firm, to work on the tax side of it. We would work on the my law firm would work on the asset protection and also some of the tax planning. And then the third party that I would bring in is always a financial advisor to make sure that it meets the goals of the clients for their retirement planning, their lifestyle needs, whatever the case may be.
And as Bill just shared, those would be individuals that I would refer my clients to. I cannot give tax advice. I cannot give CPA advice. I cannot give financial advice. I am not licensed in those areas, but I do know and can see issues in those areas that might crop up. And it's my duty and responsibility to create awareness in the client so that they will then seek the best advice from those individuals.
Absolutely.
Right. And this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with both of you, is that I can see that there are additional professionals that need to be involved, and you two know who they are and can bring in those that help, right?
Correct.
Absolutely.
So Phil, let's talk a little about like clients' needs in a sense. From your experience, how often do clients inquire when they come to you about estate planning? It's like, I need an estate plan. Are they also talking about real estate, or is like real estate is inherent in, well, I guess it is inherent in estate planning, right? It's gotta
Yeah,
be.
I mean,
So they're coming because of estate planning, right?
yeah, typically, here in California, the real estate is so expensive. And because of the probate laws, if you own real estate, you need to have a trust. You're doing a disservice to your heirs if you don't have a trust. And so almost every one of my clients does have real estate. Some of them don't, but almost everyone does. Sometimes they're just content with keeping the real estate. Maybe it's their personal home. Maybe they have rental real estate and they're just content with keeping it. But when they have rental real estate, then that conversation turns to, well, not only do you need to worry about protecting it from probate, but what about protecting it from creditors and predators? What if something happens on your property and somebody gets injured? So we need to make sure there's asset protection. And then also, do you plan on keeping this real estate for the long term, or do you plan on selling it in the short term? And if so, maybe we need to do some tax planning and bring in someone like Valerie to say, okay, this is what the market looks like. This is, what you would expect if you want to sell it in a year, 2 years, whatever the case may be. And then we can try to do some planning to make sure they pay the least amount of taxes when that time comes.
Okay. And then to Valerie, when you're in a real estate transaction or, working with a client interested in purchasing a property, do you understand their long-term goals with regard to the estate planning need, or do you offer advice, or at what point does that come in? Like before the sale closes or after the sale closes? When does that conversation come up for you?
that conversation's initiated at the first consultation. It's always my objective to understand the long-term goals of the client. And I always, always encourage my clients to make sure that property is either in their existing trust or they create a trust. As Phil was saying, most of his clients have real estate, and that real estate is usually the largest asset in a trust. And so we want to protect that and want to protect that for the heirs. That's our role. That's our objective. So understanding the client's long-term objectives, and the individuals, the personalities involved. I'm sure Phil hears this as well. I want to leave something for this individual, but not for this one. How do I protect that? How do I do that? This is who gets the house. This is not who gets the house. And inherent in all of this is making sure that not only do we have the trust, but if we have rental property, that all of those records are very, up to date, timely, and accessible. It's one thing to have a trust and have that tucked away, but there's supporting information that needs to be in that trust. And that should be everything about the real estate. So we talk about those things. Is this going to be your forever home, or is this a stepping stone to another property? What about the second home? Do you intend to keep this? Will you be liquidating this as you retire? What exactly are your objectives, and how can we protect that asset?
Valerie, do you find that your clients actually know what's in their trust?
No. How about you, Phil? Do they?
I concur 100%. Not a lot. If it's the basic revocable living trust, typically they know. But if they have a special type of trust for asset protection or tax planning, a lot of the times the clients don't realize it and actually don't follow the appropriate rules because they're not aware of it, which is why, it's important to get the CPA and financial advisor involved as well as the real estate agent to make sure they are treating it as if it's in the trust and not one of their personal assets.
Okay. So, Phil, what are the legal considerations that realtors should keep in mind when assisting clients with property transactions, inside or outside of the estate plan? In other words, what are realtors failing to inform their clients about?
Yeah, I think Valerie nailed this on the head earlier. Being able to help their clients and tell the clients, hey, have you considered the tax consequences? Have you considered the asset protection consequences? And although I'm not an attorney, I know that there could be consequences from this transaction. So you should go seek out an attorney or a tax professional that can help you with that. And so that's really, that differentiates a good realtor from a bad one. A bad one will either try to give advice or completely ignore the fact that those things are a big factor in the sale of a home or purchase.
Can you guys share any case studies where effective collaboration between, say, you as an estate planner and as a realtor made a significant difference for the client?
I recently had a transaction where the sister, who was not inheriting, lived out of state, had never seen the two pieces of property in Orange County that her brother had, and had to work with his domestic partner, who was getting the primary residence, a rental property that was being liquidated with no documentation, no rental agreement. We had nothing, and a domestic partner who was reticent to provide documents that we needed. The collaboration between myself and that attorney helped smooth things over, make sure that we were able to legally remove the tenant and put the property on the market and getting sold. After the trust was closed, the domestic partner came up with a HELOC that should have been handled within the trust, and that she wanted to have the executor pay off. So working together, I discovered the loan was a HELOC. The attorney then worked to make sure that the executor was not responsible for that. The estate was not responsible for that. But it was only because of our collaboration that we were able to resolve these issues competently to everyone's satisfaction, even the domestic partner.
Yeah, and we work with a whole bunch of situations that are almost exactly like that. It's typically upon an inheritance where somebody needs to be evicted from the home, and then the home needs to be cleaned up. And so, the attorney has to coordinate with the real estate advisor and say, okay, these are the legalities that can be done. And then the real estate agent has to say, okay, this is when we can clean up the house and help the whether it's the personal representative or the trustee to get the house cleaned up and prepared for sale. So it really takes a lot of back and forth collaboration. And like I said, almost all the cases that we work together are just like Valerie just described.
Okay. So it's that kind of outside person in a sense that can cause a problem with a inheritance or a transaction like that, it seems like.
Yeah, not necessarily outside. It's a beneficiary usually, but not typically the beneficiary that's charged with handling the sale of a property.
Okay. But in your example, Valerie, was that domestic partner like a beneficiary? Part of the
Oh,
claim?
yes.
Oh, okay. And it still became difficult, huh?
Yeah, she got the bulk of the assets. Yes, still very difficult.
Wow. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little about tax implications because I think taxes are hard to understand. Maybe you can help simplify some of these, but like how do estate planning decisions impact property taxes and how can realtors advise clients on this aspect?
I always talk to clients about changes in property taxes, and they are definitely impacted on the death of a property owner. And one of the first things that needs to take place that is not part of the trust is either the heir, the trustee, somebody needs to file the change in ownership of a real property owner upon death. That document must be filed with the county tax assessor. It is a California state law. If it is not done within 152 days, there is a penalty and there are fines, and the property is assessed at the current market value. So it's a very costly lack of compliance, and it is easily complied with. It's one of the first things I do when someone comes to me and says, we have a death. This is the property. We need to talk to our trust attorney, and I make sure that they get this document. For each county, it's just a tad different, but almost every county in the state of California has that. Secondly, Proposition 19, which Phil referred to earlier, voted into law in 2020, implemented in 2021, completely changed gifting your property to your child. Not gifting, but actually leaving it to your child. If that individual does not take residency of the property, it is reassessed. In the past, they could rent the property out and keep the same tax basis. Not anymore. So if you were looking, let's say parents paid $160,000 for the property, current taxation, taxes they were carrying forward is $4,000. We're now 40 years later, and the property tax is approximately $22,000. That would be what the heirs would be looking at. Consequently, most of them will sell the property. And we're just seeing that coming down the pipeline now because it was implemented in 2021 while we were still in a pandemic and a quarantine.
Is this just California?
To my knowledge,
It
now
is.
to practice, I'm only licensed to practice in California.
Yeah, this is just California. And to, add to Valerie's point on Prop 19, not only do they have to move in, but there's paperwork that needs to be filed showing within a year, showing that they moved in. Otherwise, they don't get that exemption. And then really the biggest thing that I see is not just realtors, but realtors and estate planning attorneys that do not know the property tax law, giving horrible advice to people and saying, oh, you don't need a trust or whatever the case may be. Why don't you just add your kids on title with you? And then we get phone calls. At least weekly on this. Somebody says, I don't understand. I went to an attorney or my real estate agent said, all I need to do is put my kids on title. And all of a sudden I got a bill from the assessor saying, I owe an extra $15,000 a year in property taxes. Well, that's because you just can't add somebody on title anymore, especially since Prop 19. Things need to be done through an LLC or a trust to avoid that reassessment.
Any change in title triggers a reassessment unless there's an exception.
Yep.
Well,
And this is the case
go
for a
ahead.
long time, but it's really enforced now.
Repeat that, please.
That has been the case for a long time, but it's really being enforced now.
Okay. Well, in my own case, I have to say that, I know Phil helped me get my property tax corrected. It was low. When I got married, the county mistakenly increased it, reassessed it. And, that was the first question I asked Phil is like, understand that this doesn't happen when you get married, right? If it's in a
And the
trust.
assessor makes mistakes all the time. We are constantly correcting mistakes by the assessor.
So,
And I hate to say this, it's especially with LA County.
so Phil wrote the letter. I had to go back and forth and with my trust and all kinds of stuff, but I got it back to its original low amount. So thanks, Phil.
Absolutely.
That's where the estate planning knowledge comes in very handy. And then, you gave worse examples, like how, that it can generate thousands of dollars of taxes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's something that we as realtors can also help before it gets to be the problem that requires Phil to step in. Whenever anyone is changing title, getting married, adding a child, taking a child out, any change in title triggers a reassessment. But we do have documentation required with that change in title that has exemptions, and those exemptions will prevent that. We can provide that documentation through the title company to an individual. They can sign it, complete it, and it will go with a change in title through the title company to the assessor's office and offset. Even putting your property in and out of the trust can bring that about. So again, we're always adding this documentation that says this is just a change in the trust, out of the trust, etc.
Okay, Phil, let's talk about multi-generational planning.
Mhm.
How do you approach estate planning? Well, this is for both of you, actually. How do you approach estate planning and real estate advice when working with clients who are considering passing on assets to beneficiaries?
Yeah. So again, it's different for every single client. Even if multiple clients want to do this, everybody's got a unique situation. And we typically break it down into different segments. We talk about things like, what are the consequences of leaving it to one generation? Not tax wise, but is it going to cause fighting amongst heirs? Is it going to cause issues with putting one person in charge versus another person in charge? And then we would have a separate conversation for the same transaction about what capital gains tax issues might be, and a separate conversation about what the estate tax issues might be, and then a separate conversation about what the property tax issues might be. And then once the client has all that information, then it's up to them to make a decision how they want to proceed forward. And then we memorialize that into a trust or whatever documents necessary.
Do you get involved in that process too, Valerie, with regard to beneficiaries and the foreshadowing of what's going to happen with that property?
Many times clients do share with me, what they would like to do, what they would like to leave to which individual, etc. And again, this is where I point out issues that can occur and I steer them to a good trust attorney, tax attorney, financial advisor, so that they get the expertise. And, I discuss with them, and as Phil alluded to, what kind of issues are this going to create within the family? Is it better to have an outside individual be the trustee, a fiduciary to handle these things for you? And again, a lot of that depends on the value of the assets as well. This is a very large estate. It's handled differently than your more typical estates.
Okay. Let's talk a little about more of the legal pitfalls in this real estate transaction. Like, Phil, what legal pitfalls should realtors be aware of when handling transactions involving properties within a state? We might have discussed this already, but is there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest issue is the taxes. The tax code is so complicated. Most attorneys don't understand the tax code. There's very few attorneys that really do. And so clients should always consult a tax attorney to figure out what the consequences of doing a transaction are going to be. And especially like Valerie said earlier, since Prop 19 went into effect, that typically ends up being the biggest tax issue for most people, because, if your property taxes go up 10, 20 grand a year, that's a lot of money over your lifetime. Quite more than the capital gains taxes would be on a sale a lot of the times.
Yes. Agreed.
Okay. All right. Good. Let's just, if you could, summarize, for listeners, for each of you, for listeners who may be in the process of estate planning with real estate. Well, estate planning and real estate, they go together. What are the top 3 things they should know from your perspective, Valerie? What are the top three things that are
One,
mentioned?
the value of their property. That's critical. What is the current value? What can we anticipate going forward? And that's always, subject to a lot of change. But overall, what has appreciation been in the state of California over the last 50 years? Something for them to anticipate that the value of the property might be worth such and such in 5 years or 2 years or 10 years. Making sure, again, that they have a trust attorney draw up the trust if there are, and there are, tax consequences, et cetera. So they have that knowledge that the trust they put together serves the purposes that they want, that the intention is clearly stated, and that it can be easily implemented upon their death. So you really caution them to give a lot of thought to the individuals that they are bequeathing, to the value of the assets that they're bequeathing, and to using very trusted, knowledgeable professionals in every aspect. A little money spent now will save tens of thousands of dollars at the end. And, I unfortunately see and feel this too, where the wishes of the decedent are not clear or not implementable in the current market. And, it just invalidates their wishes, and that's not what we want to do. But, things must be clearly presented. I was recently shown a trust that a client had done online, and I just cringe to look at it. It's it any anybody contesting that, any attorney will just tear that to pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. And before I get to the three things for me, I want to reiterate what Valerie said. Unfortunately, you get what you pay for, whether it comes to doing your estate plan and just going on a, document prep site and doing it on your own versus using an attorney to do it. And whether you go out with that real estate agent that's charging 1% commission versus one charging 3% commission, you're getting what you pay for. If the real estate agent is only charging 1% commission, that means they have to do more volume than somebody that's doing a 3% commission. And that means they're not giving you their full attention that they should. So you get what you pay for there. And then if you do an estate plan online on your own and you just answer the questions, you don't know, and here's where my three things comes in, you don't know what the consequences of your decisions are. How will those consequences affect your kids and fighting? A lot of people, when you ask on an online estate plan, who do you want to be in charge of your estate and dividing it up when you die? A lot of people's first answer is going to be, say they have a son and a daughter. I want both my son and my daughter to do that. They get along, they'll be great at figuring it out together. Well, that's how 90% of the litigation works out. You really need to appoint one person so that there's no fighting. The second thing is they don't know what the asset protection consequences are. If you pick to move this asset here, how is that going to affect your liability? And then the third thing is, how is it going to affect your taxes? Some of the online trusts that I see, they could end up causing an estate more money in taxes than if they had no trust whatsoever. Sometimes it's really quite bad. And so it's important to seek out an experienced attorney, an experienced real estate agent, and don't discount yourself. Pay a fee to get somebody to do it right. And like Valerie said, you're paying maybe a few $1,000s up front, but you're saving yourselves tens or even hundreds of thousands in the future.
You have a third one?
But that was the three: the consequences of the fighting, the asset protection, and the tax.
Okay. Got it. All right. Anything else that we've missed that you'd like to mention?
Go ahead, Valerie.
I think we've covered everything, but I think that what people need to understand is that they can discuss with a trust attorney, with real estate, with a knowledgeable individual, initial consultations, initial questions before they move forward. I find that my clients are sometimes hesitant to talk to an attorney, but they're hesitant. And, that's why I make sure that the attorneys that I refer them to are people who have their client's best interest in mind, who are approachable, who are responsive, so that the client doesn't wait for weeks for a response or for a phone call or for a document. Those are critical. So in essence, what I'm saying is don't be afraid to consult us with your questions and your concerns. We may not have all the answers, but we know who does.
Absolutely. So we do free consultations for everyone, whether it's, a basic family starting out with not many assets, or we have a family that's worth $1 billion is one of our clients. And we will do a free consultation for everybody, no matter what your concern is, to help you out and make sure that you get the appropriate advice that you need. So really, you shouldn't be afraid because of cost. Go seek it out. And I know Valerie does too. Go seek it out and find out what it'll cost, because maybe in your mind, you're thinking it's going to be unaffordable, but it really might actually be affordable. So it doesn't hurt to get free consultation. And then the other thing for me is be open and honest with your family. People like to make decisions and not share with their family and talk about it. And I know it's an uncomfortable situation to talk about your death, but you should talk with your kids and your heirs about, hey, this is what I expect when I die, because that avoids fighting amongst your family. Whether it's written in a trust or not, if you don't tell your kids what your desires are, how are they to know what's written in that trust, or whether truly your desires, or somebody pressured you into saying it? Versus if you have that conversation at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, whenever the case may be, then there's less fighting in the future.
Great. Well, this has all been very enlightening. Glad that you're in our network. You're trusted professionals. We look forward to working with you in 2024 with Power Partners USA. Well, thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Alan.